Takaichi and Japan hold the 81st annual remembrance of the victims of the Hiroshima nuclear bomb attacks without ever mentioning that it was the United States who dropped a nuclear bomb on Japan. That's a very important detail to leave out, right? Another humiliation ritual for Japan in order to stay in the good graces of their daddy, Donald Trump. If you was a young Japanese child today, you would have no idea listening to your government that it was the United States, you know, the country that your ruling class is extremely loyal to, who actually dropped the nuclear bomb on Japan. After World War II, Japan became a puppet state of the United States, who set up a one-party dictatorship that has been in power in Japan for 70 years. This ruling party, in order to maintain their power and U.S. support, swears loyalty to the United States in their foreign policy. This is why Sane Takaichi came out in favor of Donald Trump's illegal war against Iran, despite the Japanese working class being greatly harmed by it because of Japan's reliance on the Strait of Hormuz for their energy needs. This is why Sane Takaichi supports Donald Trump's illegal war against Iran, despite it being massively unpopular among the Japanese working class and Japan paying greatly because their reliance on energy imports from the Strait of Hormuz. This is why Japan continues to fearmonger about China on behalf of the United States, despite all the war crimes that the Japanese committed against the Chinese people. Based on how Japan talks about China, you would think it was them who dropped the nuclear bomb on them. Donald Trump tells Zelensky that there's nothing that the United States can do to help Ukraine defend itself from massive Russian bombardment because the United States ran out of interceptors fighting a war against Iran and helping defend Israel. Russia has completely hammered Ukraine over the last few days in retaliation for Ukraine launching attacks into Moscow and targeting civilian infrastructure. During these Russian attacks, Ukraine intercepted 0 Russian missiles. Donald Trump also told Gulf allies that the United States can do nothing to defend them because Iran has completely bled them dry. You guys notice how all these conflicts are connected and they are impacted by one another? Russia and Iran together has effectively demilitarized the NATO alliance. This is an amazing accomplishment for the resistance, and the military-industrial complex has been completely devastated by it, with over 80% of the THAAD interceptors used, 65% of Patriot missiles suspended, and essentially all the ATACMS gone. At current production rates, it will take years to replace this. And the problem is the Epstein regime cannot maintain war against both Iran and Russia for the years it will take for them to restock their military supplies. Ukraine is completely falling apart and running out of men. And last time I checked, the strait is still closed.
What's poppin'? My friends, my family, welcome back. You guys know I'm always in the lab cooking. These leaks that come from the Pentagon and the media is always interesting to analyze because it shows the mindset that the United States military, the Pentagon, and many people in Congress and Senate actually think about the war that they actually can't say out loud. So you have the military-industrial complex leaking about how Iran and Russia has been successful in demilitarizing the NATO alliance, and how you guys know how like Iran was just probing the defenses of the West, completely dismantled the bases, and meanwhile they just getting started. They completely rebuilt their missile infrastructure. That was one thing they was doing during the Memorandum of Understanding, the MOU. I mean, the axis of resistance strategy is working. People say, what Russia need to do more? Fam, one of the reasons why the Epstein axis has been weakened because Putin has helped Iran demilitarize NATO. They are spread thin. That's why Donald Trump had to deliver the bad news to the Nazis in Ukraine. Like, hey, sorry guys, we can't really help you. So they're cooked. That's why the Pentagon is leaking this. Donald Trump's frustration over the Iran war boiled over at Camp David last week. Bro, they got leakers all over the place because they're like, bro, I don't want to go down with this ship. This is horrific. Donald Trump is about to die. He's like 80,000 years old. Donald Trump is about to die. He barely can fucking move. He already know his legacy is washed. He don't really care. Meanwhile, the Republicans who have midterms, J.D. Vance, his political career is cooked. So people in the administration are leaking left and right. And now they leaking that Donald Trump is now planning to throw Pete Hegseth under the bus, as he said that he was misled by Pete Hegseth about the extreme problem of the munitions shortage. He like, Pete Hegseth, you said it was all good, that we were still locked and ready to go. So you guys see how the rats are already starting to maneuver and starting to shift blame on one another? Of course, they're going to come out and deny all the story, but Donald Trump, he's not really a smart guy, because they were like, man, come on, man, these leaks are nonsense. But this story also came out. Look, Trump orders leak probe after venting about media coverage of munitions stockpiles. You guys want to know what Donald Trump actually said? He said that you guys cannot report on this, and it's a crime for you to report on this because it makes the United States look bad. That is his real quote. You can't report on this because it makes us look bad. It exposes how we are completely losing to the axis of resistance. So how can you say this leak is fake news and didn't happen, but at the same time you're going to order a probe into the leak? You guys see how that doesn't make sense? So is the leak fake or not? If the leak is fake, why would you need to launch an investigation? Nope. The Pentagon is scrambling. They're in panic mode trying to figure out how they're going to dig themselves out of this hole. And to help me analyze this, I have an amazing reporter. This is the second time we have Steve join us today on the Nick Cruse RBN branch channel. Our first conversation was amazing. Steve Sweeney is an award-winning journalist reporting out of Lebanon, and he was targeted by the IDF in Israel because how powerful his reporting is. Last time you was on our show, you took us to school, so it's great to have you back on, man. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
There's like two train of thoughts regarding this story about the munitions. I don't know how much you've been following this, but there's one side of the story where it's like, yeah, the military-industrial complex and the Pentagon, they just want to sell more weapons. Like, they just want to make more money, so they always say that there's a shortage of stockpiles and munitions. But I believe that there's real truth in this, in terms of how horrific of a position the military-industrial complex is, the fact that they couldn't protect U.S. bases, the fact that they're telling Gulf allies that they can't protect them, and they're allowing Ukraine to be hammered. I don't think these are things they would do if it was fake. You know what I mean? But that's just my opinion. What do you think, Steve? Do you think this is a real thing that is happening? What's your thoughts on the updates on the Iran war? Because Iran, they're not looking to negotiate because they see how strong of a position they are in. Do you agree with that analysis? What do you think? Once again, thank you for joining us, Steve.
Well, I think there's certainly a crisis for the military-industrial complex. There's absolutely no doubt about that, and we've seen that playing out here in this region, particularly with what's happening in Iran right now. There's very mixed messages coming from the White House, from the American administration. On the one hand, Donald Trump is ratcheting up the rhetoric, and he's saying that I'm going to bomb you back to the Stone Age, all of this kind of thing, and he's issues these arbitrary deadlines, and then as those deadlines get nearer, all of a sudden he sort of rolls back, and those attacks that he's promised, the devastation that he's promised, they haven't quite happened. And we're seeing this not just play out not just in this region, but also in Ukraine as well. Now, Donald Trump, I don't think is, he's not a man of principles or morals or anything like that. Donald Trump's about Donald Trump, and lining his pockets, stroking his ego and this kind of thing. Just before I came on air, I was listening to your introduction, and I was just looking on my back through my Twitter account, and this is going back now. When was this? 2023, so nearly 3 years ago now, when I was covering the war in Donbass. And one of the things that I found there was particularly shocking, but I think it's relevant to the discussion that we're having now, because I remember I was in Donetsk city, and we got news that there had been a civilian area targeted, and this was quite normal. It happened pretty much every single day. So we went to the building that was targeted, and it was on the just the other side of the Kalmius River. It was in a very poor part of the city, and this missile had ploughed into a babushka's home. Now, this was again very, very, very common. They used to talk about Donetsk roulette, because the
Right.
missiles were just firing into civilian areas. I saw them hitting hospitals, bus stops, schools, you name it, any kind of civilian areas, supermarkets. These were all the main targets of Ukraine. Now, this particular missile, and I've got it up here, because the missiles, as you'll probably know, each missile has particular markings on it, so you can identify what kind of missile it was from, even from the fragments, from the smallest fragments. You can determine where it came from. You can quite often determine which stockpile it came from, and this one was an AGM-88 harm missile. Now, these are anti-radar missiles. Okay, so they're usually used to take out radars and whatever, but this plowed into a babushka's home. But they also have an expiry date, and the expiry date on this missile was the 31st of March 1991. So this missile was 32 years out of date. Now, of course, that creates huge problems, because with the AGM-88 harms, you can't really adapt them particularly. So they couldn't, they haven't been updated or modernized or anything. So it was as it was at the time it was issued, and so it was 32 years out of date. So what that told us was that the United States was supplying Ukraine with out of date stock. So it was essentially using stuff that it had got stockpiled to give to the Ukrainians, and saying, look, we're giving you arms. But so this was 3 years ago. So you can tell something about the state of the military-industrial complex back then, in terms of the missiles that they were giving to the Ukrainians. Now, if you recall, right at the back of the start of the special military operation, the Pentagon called this meeting with, I think, the 8 leading defense companies, the 8 leading arms manufacturers. They called them into the Pentagon to say, look, what's the state? How fast can you produce new weapons? Now, once your stockpiles are depleted, production, you have to keep up the rate of production of the arms and the missiles. Otherwise, America will want its own missiles to defend its own country, not just simply, send them off around the world to attack poor countries, which it likes doing, obviously. And this is part of its projection of power. But I think, as we've seen now, as you rightly said, with what's happening in Iran, well, Trump's policy, he doesn't seem to have a policy. That's the key thing. There seems to be no end goal. What does he want to achieve in Iran? And you speak to military strategists, and they don't know either. They seem to think that they could take out the leadership, the Iranian leadership. Of course, it was a few years ago that they assassinated Qasem Soleimani, as you'll remember, at Baghdad International Airport in a drone strike authorized by Trump himself. And again, more recently, they've taken out the supreme leader. They had a go at targeting and bombing bridges. Iran rebuilt them very quickly. They've had a go at instigating internal foment. They've done it a few times over the years, and each time it's failed quite dramatically. What they didn't bank on, I don't think, was that Iran was going to strike the American military bases. Now, to all extents and purposes, it's gone. The United States has lost its power in the region, and you'll start seeing some of these comprador countries that are hosting US military bases. Well, they're now, maybe having kind of second thoughts, because they're finding themselves in the firing line, but also their own people are opposed to American military presence in their countries, not just because it makes them unsafe, but also because they don't want to be part of the US imperialist project. So there's this, now we've seen the new alliance that has been formed this Turkey-Saudi alliance, which has been formed, which is obviously not anything to do with well, it's more to do with Iran than it is to do with Israel. A lot of these countries, of course, for whatever they say externally and publicly, we know the reality is that they support Israel and oppose Iran, and they see Iran as a bigger threat than Israel. So I think that Trump has succeeded, in demilitarizing the US presence in the region, as Russia has as well with Ukraine. It's ended up demilitarizing NATO. NATO was, it's it's quite absurd.
Exactly what Putin said he wanted to do. That's exactly what Putin said he wanted to do, was to demilitarize Ukraine and NATO, and that's what he's doing. But please continue.
Yeah, and they didn't really have to do too much in order to do it. To be perfectly honest, it was and it was very, very apparent in the early stages of Russia's special military operation in Ukraine. You could start seeing now that that this was a NATO war. It was a NATO-led war. It was a US war, and it was not just against Russia. It was also against China, the primary target of the US imperialists in terms of their military strategy and their military doctrine. Saw China as the biggest threat. This was back at the start of this special military operation. But all of a sudden, these European countries have bankrupted themselves. Britain, it doesn't have weapons to defend itself if it's attacked now, because it's sent so much military hardware to Ukraine, and the British military commanders have sounded the alarm. They've sounded it for a long time, actually, but still they obsess about sending weapons to Ukraine, as have many of the countries in the European Union. So that's hugely depleted NATO countries' stockpile. They're hugely weakened, and what have they achieved? You have to say very little. They've achieved very little. Ukraine's lost, right? However much whatever you hear, I don't know about in the American press as much as you'll do, but I certainly in the British press, they're still pushing this line, and the British government is still pushing this line that Ukraine can win, or Ukraine. Sometimes they even say Ukraine's winning, and I mean it's at total odds with the reality. And it's the same in Iran. What have they actually achieved apart from massacring more than 160 school kids in Minab? The structural damage that they have imposed, this damage has been repaired very, very quickly. Support for the Iranian government has hardened amongst the people. There's now more of a sense of unity amongst the diverse minorities that make up Iran. They're more unified and standing against US imperialism. So you have to say it's failed on almost every level. But this issue now, and this is why you're starting to see the leaks that you were talking about in your introduction. Leaks don't happen by accident; they happen for a reason. And I think that there's part of them that sees that the lack of strategy in Iran, and I think it's also worth mentioning that the casualty rate amongst US soldiers is much, much higher than the American public are being
100%.
told. There's no doubt about that either. There's a huge cover up of the casualty figures, and I think that the military will be aware that if they carry on, those figures are going to rise quite dramatically as well. And there's you can cover up your losses to a degree, but once those losses start becoming heavier and heavier, then it's very, very hard to keep a lid on that kind of thing. And I think once the American public start to see their soldiers, their people, their brave boys, as they call them, and girls, the men and women that are coming back in body bags, when they start to see them en masse, that's when people will start to turn again against Trump. They'll start to turn against the war. So they're in a very difficult position right now, I think. And whether it's difficult to know whether they underestimated the Iranian resolve, Iran's military capability, or whether Trump simply ignored the advice that he was given, which, both of those things could be true. I think, this is, not a stable individual that we're talking about. This is somebody that surrounds himself with yes people, and if they disagree with him, they're out. So I think, yeah, things are going very, very badly. It doesn't mean we're out of the woods in this region, by the way, I can tell you. Things are certainly ratcheting up now in Lebanon. We've seen over the past few days, the two, they broke it on one day. On Wednesday, there were 113 projectiles fired over a 24-hour period by the Israelis. That's drone strikes, artillery strikes, air strikes in the south of Lebanon. The following day, that was the biggest since the end of June. So there'd been a bit of a lull in terms of the volume of attacks. And then on Thursday, it was 120. And these coincide with these, I don't know what to describe them as, negotiations that are currently underway. They've shifted now. They were in Washington, but now they're taking place. The sixth and seventh round took place in Rome. These are the talks between Israel and Lebanon, mediated by the United States. So, and they didn't go very well this time. Well, they haven't gone very well for the entire 7 rounds, but this time they almost collapsed. Israel was threatening to walk out because there was some threat posed to them that they wouldn't be able to carry on bombing the south of Lebanon, and yeah, that was unpalatable to them. So there's certainly been an uptick, and we see that around. We always see it when the talks are happening. We see an escalation in these kind of strikes to put pressure on those talks. But I think again, even in Lebanon, and we have to say that it's a US led, it's a US Israel invasion, occupation, etc. We have to frame it in those terms, but their strategy here is also failing. So they're failing in Lebanon, they're failing in Palestine, they're failing in Iran, and they're failing in Ukraine. So this is, I think the only thing that they've been successful in has been Venezuela, and again, that's like a partial success in a way, not the kind of success that they'd be hoping for. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens there. And Cuba, of course, is also now in the crosshairs of the imperialists, but they don't seem to learn the lessons of history. And this is the bizarre thing. I was trying to remember the last time the Americans won a war. Do you know? I don't know.
Not in my lifetime. And the Axis of Resistance, who are massively successful against the Epstein regime, they're just waiting on the American people at this point because they're doing their part. They're like, man, why aren't you guys uprising against this Epstein demon? It was revealed that your government was involved in mass cover-ups of raping of children. You got the
exactly.
So everyone else around the world, and this is where I'm at, especially this is why I'm not super excited about DSA imperialists being elected. I'm like, bro, why aren't the American people uprising against these demons? Because that's all they need to happen now. Yeah. The empire is being checkmate's on the battlefield.
So I guess you get a lot of this with in America, and we see it certainly in the UK. So it's it's a similar. The similar thing that happens is that this kind of anger, this outpouring of anger, and people are obviously not just at the wars that are happening across the world, but also the situation that they face at home with rising bills, people struggling to make ends meet, the economy on the brink of collapse. Exactly. And any kind of progressive politics or any that mood is dragged into social democratic parties like like the Democrats or the DSA or the Labour Party or whatever in Britain, that are fully wedded to the capitalist system. The same capitalist system that is raining down hell in this region, but also is the same capitalist system that's creating the conditions that you live in and that you face at home as well. I mean, it's a capitalist system that means you don't have a job, or the capitalist system that means you can't pay your bill, you don't have a house, that you're living on the street, that you're relying on food banks. So to sort of channel all that energy, they find these kind of popular figures every now and again Bernie Sanders in the US, Jeremy Corbyn in Britain, whose role really is to keep that system going and to keep hope in in a parliamentary democracy, or the continuation of the two-party state in America, or whatever it is. Let's see what we've got here. Hassan
Yeah,
Piker's
so Steve,
controversial.
so Steve, so I don't know how much you follow American domestic politics because the new DSA hero is this Muslim Zionist Dubai landlord named Abdul Al Sayed,
Say, yeah.
and he has a very negative opinion about Hezbollah. And you're the
What a
perfect
surprise.
person to ask about this because you've been
What a
reporting
surprise.
In Lebanon. You know, you spoke to Hezbollah before. So here's I want to get your
Many
thoughts on
times.
this. Yeah, I want to get your thoughts. Like, what your mindset about this? Because this was an article about his disagreements with Hassan Piker. That's part not is not important, but this is the important part I want to bring up to you. Look, among
Yeah.
Piker's past controversial statements, he at one point declared he doesn't have a problem with the terrorist group Hezbollah. When this journalist interviewing him mentioned that, El Said said that's one thing he disagrees with Hassan on. Those are the things he and I are going to disagree on. So, and he's been known to condemn Hamas. He has statements condemning Hamas, Hezbollah.
Right.
What would you say to like these professional managerial class landlords like El Sayed who have a negative opinion about Hezbollah? Are they right? What's your thoughts?
I mean, yeah. I mean, clearly he's a career politician. I don't know him. I did read something about him a day or so ago when he was elected, and I think he made some kind of statement that he loves Jews and Judaism, and I don't know why he felt the need to come out and and profess that. I think it's a code for don't worry, I'm not opposed to Israel, or whatever. So he's taking that the Zionist line there. But I mean, again, he's just parroting the line of the U.S. State Department there. That's all he's doing. Is if he's saying that he does have a problem, because if he's saying the disagreement with Hassan Piker said he didn't have a problem with Hezbollah and he disagrees, so he does have a problem with Hezbollah.
Yeah,
Now, I'm not entirely sure what his problem is, and he's called them a terrorist organization. I see from, or certainly it was couched in those terms in the clip that you just put up.
yeah, he's one of
And
those people. Just to quickly sum it up, he's one of those people that said that terrorist group like Hamas put Lebanese people into more danger. How they don't have the trust in the Lebanese people. How they're authoritarians who threaten democracy. The same thing with Hamas. They essentially carbon paste all their arguments against them. But please continue your thoughts,
I
Steve.
mean, I would challenge these kind of people that call Hezbollah a terrorist organization to point me to one of the acts of terrorism that they've committed. And people often stumble because they can't. They may go back to something along the lines of, sometimes I hear this from Americans and they say, well, what about the Marine barracks bombing in Lebanon? And well, okay, this took place before Hezbollah actually existed. So I mean, you can chalk that one off, because you're living in a bit of a fantasy world if you believe that. But even if you do believe that it was Hezbollah,
Yeah,
well, you have to say, and people won't like this, and the American public certainly won't like this. But you have to say, if American soldiers are on the territory of a foreign country and they're there to do the bidding of certain powers, then they do become a target. And I think this was something, I know that this was a big issue for the huge issue for the Americans in terms of their future foreign policy, and sending troops to other countries. I mean, it didn't last obviously very long. They soon got the taste for it again, but it had a huge impact on that. But you have to remember, what is Hezbollah? Where did they come from? Why do they exist? Why do they retain the support of a very large section of society? Now, Hezbollah is obviously it came as a movement of the oppressed. That was how it started. The oppressed people of the South. Now, before Hezbollah existed, there were groups operating and had popular support in the South. Communist organizations were had strong bases of support there. They but then there was the formation of, you know, this, we'll talk about it, you know, as the movement of the oppressed people of the South, and then that kind of coalesced into the Amal movement, and then a breakaway from the Amal movement became Hezbollah. Now, the people of the South, they're not predisposed to violence or guns or anything like that. There's a very good reason why these organizations formed.
Exactly.
And that has a lot to do, or let's say everything to do, with their very near neighbor, the Zionists in occupied Palestine, that had been attacking their communities even since before the state of Israel was declared in 48. So they formed and organized to defend their communities. Now, that before Hezbollah, before Amal and Hezbollah came along, you know, they were sort of self-organized in their communities, not part of an umbrella organization. But of course, you know, that has a limited effect when, you know, you're faced with the, you know, the onslaught of the imperialist powers. You know, the Israelis are, you know, the Zionists are their proxy force. And when you're faced with that, of course, you need to be better organized. And that's where Hezbollah came from. Now, Hezbollah operates as a political party. It has members of parliament. It has held posts within the Lebanese government. It runs social programs, hospitals, all sorts of things. And it's not just Hezbollah that does that, by the way. This is the way that Lebanese society operates, in that each kind of sect, each organization, they run their own schools, they run their own hospitals, you know, and this kind of thing. Just before people think it's a way that they indoctrinate people and you know, force them to support them, you know, it's not like that at all. So they have the political wing of the party, which again formed after the armed wing, and you know, they embraced, or they decided to participate in parliamentary politics. I can't remember the exact date, but it was in the 90s, after the end of the Civil War, which wasn't a civil war, but people understand it in those terms. And they have the military wing, which is the force that is fighting against the Israeli invaders, and they maintain a very, very clear line in that, you know, the reason that they exist is because the Israelis are occupying their territory. If the Israelis aren't in their territory and stop invading, stop the bombing, stop the occupation, there would be no reason for their existence. So there's no kind of overriding, you know, in Hezbollah's doctrine, they have, it's not in their doctrine to take power in Lebanon either. This is another thing people talk about. This is one of the things that I find the most frustrating, is that people will say Hezbollah is backed by Iran, Hezbollah is funded by Iran.
I hate
And you're
that.
like, hello. Well, you know, you talk about that, and they talk in Lebanon about, we must get foreign influence out of Lebanon. Well, the United States has the biggest embassy, the second largest embassy in the world. The first being the US embassy in Baghdad. The second biggest embassy is in Lebanon, a country of less than 6 million people. So we know that it's sure as hell not simply there to process visa applications and passports and, you know, consular support. You know, you have to see the scale of this to just to believe how big it is. So it has this huge embassy, which is used as a spy hub for the entire region, to plan its military operations and exert its control across the region. The US was inside the Lebanese parliament building when they elected the country's president. It's pretty much appointed the prime minister as well, now of Salam. So when you talk about that kind, the influence, and now the US, actually the closing date I think was today, the US embassy was offering grants. I think it was something like $250,000 to run essentially PR jobs for the United States inside Lebanon, and to run these kind of social media campaigns to tackle disinformation,
Yeah.
this kind of thing. So, the United States wields a great influence here. It pays the Lebanese armed forces. It pays their salaries. It's the Lebanese armed forces can only buy weapons from, and it can only buy a certain type of weapons as well from the US. I think also from France and a couple of other countries, but its main supplier is the United States. Tom Barak, the envoy, or was the envoy for the Middle East, as they call it, the title. Of course, we call it West Asia here, but their Middle East envoy. Well, he came and he was very open, and he said that and I think it's in the like a funding bill that's going to the US Congress as well for this kind of thing. He said, well, the Lebanese army can have these weapons, but they can't use them against Israel. I mean, it's astonishing, really. I mean,
Yeah, and they have the nerve to say Hezbollah is a Iran proxy.
and yeah, exactly. And here you have it. The biggest, the US proxies are running rampant. They're in charge. They're in the
I
government.
remember, didn't the president condemn, I don't remember the name of the president, but then the
Joseph
Lebanese president condemn Iran once. Remember when Iran sent
Yeah.
responded to Western aggression against their country, and then they sent missiles to Tel Aviv and U.S. bases, and then the Lebanese government condemned Hezbollah in Iran and not Israel, as Israel was slaughtering their people in the south. That's wild,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Well, this is well, yeah. Just to give you some more details on that, this is a long running theme with the president and the prime minister, is that I think when the Iranians hit Al Udeid, the airbase in Qatar, the Lebanese prime minister, just happened to be on his way there for a summit of some kind, and as he landed, of course, he took to the podium and he gave a speech condemning the Iranians for their attacks. Now, at the same time, as you pointed out, South Lebanon was being bombed. There were drone strikes and airstrikes in the south, at the time. Not a word about them. And this has been a feature of Salam. And in fact, he was confronted about it directly because he never speaks out. The attacks are happening, like I said, the 113, 120 attacks, drone strikes, airstrikes, they're happening every single day. 700 tons, right? You heard that right. 700 tons of explosives were detonated last week in the area around the Beaufort Castle. This is a Crusader era castle. I think 2 or 3 days beforehand, it had been given UNESCO enhanced World Heritage status, like 3 days before. And the Israelis just rigged it with 700 tons of explosives, detonated them. It caused a seismic event. It was that powerful that, we spoke to people that were miles away, like a long way away. People even on the coast that said that they felt the ground trembling under their feet. People said they felt it in Beirut. I'm not sure about that, but I certainly didn't feel it. But some people have said that they felt it. So these kind of things are happening, and they're never condemned. And when he was challenged on it, the prime minister said, I can't condemn every single airstrike or attack.
That's crazy.
Well, yes,
That's
you
so
can
crazy.
actually. Yes, you can. It's quite easy to do that. I mean, I can't imagine any other country in the world that allows its neighbor to fire missiles into it, bomb it, to kill its own civilians, to occupy its land, and to not speak out about it. Now, of course, there's like a deepening rift, I would say, between Hezbollah and the prime minister. The prime minister, in his role, I think I may have mentioned this last time that I was on, but you remember Nawaf Salam, the prime minister. Before he became prime minister, he was the head of the ICJ. And the ICJ was, of course, carrying out the investigations. They'd said that Israel is carrying out plausible genocide in Gaza. And so he was replaced. He came to Lebanon. The Ugandan judge, whose name I forget, became the head of the ICJ. And of course, the Ugandan judge is the only pro-Zionist judge on that panel, and could have a decisive vote when if it comes to that, she can cast a vote which decides which way that inquiry and investigation goes. Now, if Salam's role was to come here, and it was to do two things: to normalize relations with Israel and to disarm Hezbollah. And one of the first things he did after March the 2nd, when the Israeli escalation happened, was to ban Hezbollah's military operations and to ban its military wing. This was the very first thing that he did. The very first thing that he said. He didn't condemn well, I don't recall. He probably did say something, but I remember, obviously, we woke up that morning to the sound of the bombing, which was happening not too far from where we were living at the time, and 10 to 12 bombs struck Beirut. And of course, Israel is the aggressor, not Hezbollah. Israel is the aggressor, and we should always remember that. And but instead of
what is his background? I'm curious, Steve. Do you know the background of the president? Is he like a Sunni? Is he a Christian?
Well, how it works is that this is a whole nother conversation, but just to put it in
I'm sorry, please continue.
In brief terms, how the Lebanese state works is that, of course, on the formation of the state of Lebanon, there was a census. It was divided up. It's a confessional state essentially, so it's divided up along religious lines. There are 18 religious sects recognized by the Lebanese state. There are many more, of course, but they're the ones that are officially recognized. In terms of the leadership, you have the leadership. The president always has to be a Maronite Christian or a Christian. The prime minister will always be a Sunni, and the speaker of the parliament, which is Nabi Berri at the moment, he's the head of the Amal movement, always has to be a Shia. So they're the three key positions in the Lebanese state. Now, when it comes to the framework agreement, the negotiations, they are only supported by a very narrow sector of Lebanese society, and I say very, very narrow. They have the support of the president, Joseph Aoun, who was formerly the head of the Lebanese army, by the way. And they have the support of now Salam, the prime minister. They don't have the support of the speaker, Nabi Berri, who represents the Shia bloc. He's the Shia within that. So it's only 2/3 even of the leadership of the Lebanese state that support the framework agreement. It hasn't ever been approved by government. These talks have never been approved by the government. They've never been approved by the people. So you look at the sort of the key politicians inside Lebanon. Nabi Berri opposes the talks. Walid Jumblat, he's the Druze leader, again a significant section of Lebanese society, he opposes them. You look at Sunni leaders that have come out in opposition to them. Hezbollah opposes them, and you speak to people, you won't find a single person that would admit to, well, you will, but is a very, very narrow sector of Lebanese society that supports the negotiations. The majority of the people oppose them. In fact, earlier today, Friday afternoon, there was a demonstration outside the parliament opposing the talks, which are now in their 7th round, because the latest round, all they've done is really consolidated and extended the period for the Israeli occupation. They're now talking, Israel Katz, the defense minister, was, I think, whether it was today or yesterday, was saying we need to prepare for a long occupation of the south of Lebanon. We're talking 50 years. So they're building now, expanding military bases inside that area. Now, some of these are like temporary, they're like forward positioning bases. I think there are 23 of them now. But there is evidence, like in places like Khiam and Marun Aras, which are fairly close to the border, but they're looking at expanding these into bigger bases now, because we've seen the aerial shots with supply routes and supply lines. They won't be able to sustain it, by the way, but this is their logic and this is their long-term thinking, and this is all being essentially ratified by the Lebanese government, by the leadership, the Lebanese leadership, by the president and the prime minister of the country. So there's kind of mass opposition
Yeah.
to this. What will happen with that? That's another question altogether. Whether it will turn into anything sort of more concrete in terms of overthrowing the government or anything like that, I think it's way too early. I don't think we're anywhere near that position. But if you look back in history, the last time such an agreement was signed was in 1983, in May 1983, and May 1982, and then within a year it had collapsed, and the government collapsed with it. So the lessons from history are not pointing in favor of any kind of deal lasting or being accepted by the people. Normalization with Israel certainly won't be.
Yeah, and this shows the character of the sellout Lebanese ruling class. That's why I wanted to ask you that, because someone who's very knowledgeable and on the ground, looking at the outside in, they seem like just vicious sellout. Look at what he was saying as
That's the Christine
Iran.
Amanpour, right?
Yeah, this is what Iran, while Iran was trying to liberate southern Lebanon from the genocidal Israeli army. That this is
This
what
was
go ahead,
Yeah,
Steve, if you
this
want
was
to chime in. Feel
shocking.
free.
Yeah, I remember this interview because we were all aghast when we saw it, and I think
Let me read the
when
headline first. So for people only listening, here's the headline, and Steve, I want you to continue. Look, the
yeah.
Lebanese president accuses Iran of using his country as a bargaining chip in peace talks with the United States. And as they're trying to end Israeli war on your people. But please continue, Steve. It's just an absurd headline. I want people to make sure they hear it.
Yeah, this was shocking, and it's very telling that he made these remarks in an interview to Christine Amanpour. Of course, I think
Yeah, of
when
course.
when you want to get this kind of message out, then what do? Let's go to Christine. Let's go to Christine Amanpour. Uh, the context of this was, again, this was because if you recall the memorandum of understanding, this was Iran was in the hot seat here, the driving seat. Let's make no mistake about that. The United States was brought to the table on its knees, really, to kind of negotiate this peace deal with Iran. So Iran was calling the shots here. The first part of the Iranian deal, the memorandum of understanding, was the withdrawal of all Israeli troops from Lebanese sovereign territory and an end to all attacks by the Israelis on Lebanon. So that was not just I can't remember how many points there were in the MOU. I think 14 points. So this wasn't just like an add-on. This was front and center of that memorandum of understanding. Iran was had a clear path to an end to Israel's war on Lebanon, and the United States, well, it had signed up to it. I remember at the time, of course, the Netanyahu came out and said, well, it doesn't apply to us. And it very clearly did apply to them because, like I said, it was the first point on there. So Joseph Aoun, in fact, before Joseph Aoun did the interview with Christine Amanpour that you've shown, Nawaf Salam was the one that piped up first, the prime minister. And he had said that no negotiations can take place about Lebanon without Lebanon having a seat at the table. So we want to be removed from those discussions, and we want our own negotiations. Now, Aoun, he took the same line, and he accused the Iranians of using his country as a bargaining chip. They were posturing, really, to be honest with you, because they could see where the balance of power lay, and the balance about Lebanon doesn't have any leverage. What's it going to go into talks with the Israelis with absolutely no leverage whatsoever? And here you have Iran saying, "Look, we're gonna include Lebanon in the memorandum of understanding with the United States. We're going to bring an end to the occupation and war that is being waged against your country. We're going to get Israeli troops out of the south of Lebanon." Right? Any other country in that position would say, "Thank you so much. Thank you for all that you're doing. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the solidarity." What people are saying is, in fact, that the Lebanese leadership I'm not talking about Nabi Berri, but the Prime Minister and President, they're quite happy for Israel to continue to bomb the south. They're quite happy for Israel to carry on doing that, to disarm Hezbollah, because they can't do it themselves. Nawaf Salam came out with this great plan to disarm Hezbollah. In fact, you know,
Don't they
contrary
know
to
their own people are being slaughtered? That's insane.
yeah,
Because the count I saw, and I want you to continue, but the count I saw was the last one I saw. Maybe you can update it for me, but it was like over 4,300 Lebanese was
exactly.
murdered since March. Like
Since
that was
March,
less
yeah.
than March, and he's like, "Yeah, that's the cost that I'm willing to pay in order to disarm Hezbollah." Thousands of people murdered. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that I really had to emphasize that because that's insane. That's
Yeah.
insane. But please continue, Steve.
No, and you're absolutely right. That is the price that they seem to be willing to pay, and it's not just the, you know, you look at it, the statistics are pretty grim. You know, I think I've lost count of the ceasefire violations now. The last time it was like 16,500 since November 2024. Every ceasefire. I mean, we don't talk about a ceasefire. There isn't a ceasefire. More than 4,300 people killed. Hundreds of those are children as well. Homes completely flattened. Israel Katz said that they've destroyed 24 what he describes as frontline villages. So there's 60 villages, towns and villages in that so-called yellow zone. 24 of them, he says, have been completely written off. The rest of them have been, you know, reduced to rubble. Yeah, 80-90% of those villages have been flattened. We were obviously we've been on the ground reporting from those areas. We can't get into those 64 60 or more than 60 villages. We can't get into that area now, but we have been right as close as we can get to them. Now, we were in the one of these so-called pilot zones. These are areas where the Lebanese army is supposed to, the Israeli army is supposed to withdraw, the Lebanese army is supposed to enter, and the people, the villagers, are supposed to be able to return. Now, I think the last time I came on, I'd just been to Frun, which is one of the three villages named in the first phase. In Frun, the Israeli army had never set foot in the village. Right, so you know it was a sop for the public, I think, to say, look, we're allowing people back in. I'll come on to this actually about Amal after because this is also something that happened. I think it was yesterday, when with Human Rights Watch and Amnesty.
Yeah.
But in the other village that we went to, Zadar al Gabia, this was another area that again hadn't been occupied by Israeli soldiers. They'd got into maybe part of the western end, just at the foot. But we turned up there, and the villagers had been camped out since Monday, and we arrived on a Thursday. So they'd spent 3-4 nights camping out, waiting to be allowed to return to their own village. And they were being denied by the Lebanese army. The Lebanese army wouldn't let them in. The Israelis wouldn't let them in. They said, if you go in, then we're going to open fire. But what happened was, on the Wednesday, the Prime Minister, Nawaf Salam, in this huge PR stunt, drove into the center of the village, obviously coordinated with the Israelis because there's no other way it could happen, went into the village, planted the Lebanese flag, and made a statement about, you know, it's our dignity, our pride, our aim to return the people of the South to their land. He planted the flag, he made this, you know, grandstanding speech, and then left again. Now, we went there, and the people there were really angry because they said, this is our village, this is our land. You know, people that have lived there for decades, generations of families that have lived there. They said it should have been us that went into the village and planted that flag, not him. And the reason that they were most angry was that he didn't even stop to speak to them. Even the local mayor, I spoke to the local mayor there. We did an interview with him, and he said no. He said he didn't. The first he knew that Salam was even arriving was he saw like a commotion. People were angry, and he saw you know, security vehicles driving through, and he thought there'd been an incident of some kind. And then the vehicles drove out again, ignored him, ignored the people. And it was only after he went on television to say, look, I didn't even know Zadar al-Ghabir was going to be a pilot zone. They didn't tell me that. They didn't tell me or coordinate Nawaf Salam coming. He didn't stop to speak to me as the elected official or the people. And it was only after that that he made this call. So in essence, this was, again, just a PR stunt. It was a photo opportunity for the Prime Minister to say, look, I'm standing with the people of the South, when in fact, he wasn't, and he hasn't at all. So yeah, that's that's the kind of the situation there. In the South is pretty grim, and there's this complete, and they've felt it not just in recent years, but they've long felt this disassociation from the Lebanese state. They always the kind of the catchphrase is, "Where is the state?" Because they don't provide anything to the people of the South. They don't provide basic amenities, electricity, water, all of this, all of these kind of social projects are in the whole provided by Hezbollah, not the state.
Yeah. I appreciate you coming on and explaining these very complex issues. I want you to speak more about the Israeli assault on journalists. I know it's very early where you're at.
Yeah.
Show some love for our friend Steve Sweeney in the chat, because he wakes up very early, come in a very awkward time because of the time zone difference. I think it's like what, 3 a.m., 4 a.m. where you're at. I'm
It's
not
coming
quite
up to
sure.
4 a.m. now. I didn't go to sleep actually. I lay on the sofa. I didn't go to
Yeah,
sleep. So
yeah,
I stayed awake.
yeah. So I'm gonna keep our shows to like a geopolitics power hour. Plus, I did a 3 hour stream on Wednesday, so I don't think I got another one of those in me. So I'm gonna ask you about this, and we can begin to wrap up. The segment I have in the title about the military begging Trump to end the war. I think I'm gonna cover that with Jamal when we do our show on Sunday. So that's still coming up. I also have Shama Sawant join me on Monday. She got over 20,000 votes running as an independent communist in Seattle.
Wow.
There are a lot of pessimism going on, but guys, I don't give a fuck about electoral results. That's a great sign of things to come. So these are things we're going to cover here in the next few days with Jamal on Sunday, Shama on Monday. I told you guys we are big back. I'm in the lab cooking. But to wrap up this show, I want you to speak more about this and what you guys have been through. I'll read this headline quickly. Like, the Israeli strike that killed journalists in Lebanon was war crime, said Human Rights Watch. And you posted this tweet, and I want you to expound more on this. It said, last week I gave
Oh yeah.
testimony to the UN assessment team on attacks on myself, and you also
Ali.
quote your
Yeah.
brother here, your comrade here, Ali. So that you guys was attacked by Israel, so you brought this up to the UN. Instead of just reading your tweet, I'm gonna ask you about it. So to wrap up our geopolitics power hour, you want to talk more about this and what you're demanding the UN to do?
I mean, I don't have any faith in the United Nations. I don't think they're going to do anything. And in fact, well, just before I come on to this, you had the report up about Human Rights Watch, Shamnasty International, and Legal Agenda. Legal Agenda are okay. Human Rights Watch and Amnesty, obviously not. The pseudo humanitarian organizations. They said that they carried out investigation and that the killing of Amar Khalil, who was a dear friend of ours, is a war crime. Now, okay, that's great, and they say it should be investigated or whatever. It's taken them 4 months to reach this conclusion. I think I did read the report. They spoke to 8 people. All of the information that they have produced was publicly available anyway. Other people have already done far more thorough investigations. Now, the reason I put my tweet out was because the UN assessment team was on the ground. They met me in Beirut, in the Union of Journalists of Lebanon, had organized this. And I did say, look, I'm very happy to give testimony. I'm very happy to speak to you. And we were there for about 3.5 hours, three hours, or more than 3 hours, certainly. We were there. So they were very thorough. I didn't hold back on anything at all. And I told them that I have no great faith in the United Nations, that UNIFIL and the United Nations has been complicit in what's happened in the country. But the key point that I made was, they can make all these pronouncements. Yeah, Volker Turk has said there could be war crimes. Now, we've heard this time and time and time again. They've said the same thing. Volker Turk has been he spoke out about attacks in in Bin Jabal, in which a family was massacred children were massacred in an Israeli strike, and he said, yeah, it should be investigated for war crimes. People are tired of hearing this,
Yeah.
because they end up and this is the criticism that I had, and I said this to the UN, that it's just going to end up being buried in a report. And you might make a strongly worded statement and condemn Israel for its attacks, but you never do anything.
Yeah,
You
that's
never do
exactly.
anything. And let me tell you something else, is that the UNIFIL forces that operate in the south of Lebanon, they've been here for decades, and their mandate is up. They'll be out of the country by next year. But we have observed the UNIFIL forces. We've observed them doing a sweep of an area where we were sitting having coffee, one of the border towns. I won't say which one it was, to protect the people there. But they were doing a sweep around. They check who's there. They take down the information of who's there, and we film them doing it. And then they drive off to an Israeli military base. So they're operating, their role in part is to operate as spies for the Zionists. We know that. So this UN assessor came, and she was very nice, very pleasant. She was very thorough. But the point is, and I said this to her from the outset, apart from the issue of it being buried in a report, is that the framework agreement that we've mentioned has 14 clauses in it. This is the agreement that has been the framework agreement between Israel and Lebanon and the United States. It has 14 clauses. The 14th clause, I think, is they must praise Donald Trump for his role in whatever. It's just bizarre to include this. But point 1 is the de facto recognition of the state of Israel. But point 13, clause 13, sorry, means that cases, whether they're for war crimes, crimes against humanity, any other kind of atrocity that is committed by Israel in Lebanon, those kind of cases can no longer be brought in international legal fora. Right? So what's going to happen? Because you've just signed away, bizarrely, I've never known a negotiation where you're signing away your country's right to take legal action in the International Criminal Court, in the International Court of Justice, at the UN Security Council, or any of the other various UN bodies. I'm not saying that I hold any faith in any of those organizations. Don't get me wrong. I don't, because justice will never come from these organizations, which were set up by the imperialist powers to entrench the capitalist system and to favor them and to punish weaker nations, not to punish the powerful. We know all of that. But to sign your right away to do that is just simply absurd. And I said, look, this is a huge slap in the face for our dear friends, because I think like I said in the last program, these are people that we knew. They're not just our colleagues, they were our friends. They were people that we knew very, very, very well. Amal's case was particularly brutal in its nature, because they bombed the car, they bombed a car in front of her, then they bombed her car, and then when she was taking shelter in a building, they bombed the building. They bombed the civil defense workers, the paramedics, even the Lebanese army, as they tried to come and rescue her. So this is very clear and very obvious, because they knew who she was, they knew where she was. But it's a slap in the face to the families of Amal Khalil, of Ali Shuaib, of Fatima Fatouni, of Mohammed Fatouni, of all of those people that have lost their lives. I'm talking about journalists, but it's also a slap in the face to the people of the South. What I did say was that it makes it more dangerous now. I mean, Israel acts with impunity anyway, but this gives them the green light to act with impunity. So it makes it more dangerous for journalists to operate in the south of the country. It makes it more dangerous for the people that live on that land to be able to return to their homes, because now it's there's that whatever avenues there were to pursue justice have just been slammed shut with the complicity of the Lebanese government.
Yeah. Once again, I appreciate you making time. I'm gonna wrap it up there. Anything else you want to shout out? Anything you want to promote before I send you off? And we're gonna read some super chats with Zoe here soon. We definitely gotta do this again. It's always great
Yeah, very happy
hearing
to.
information from
I really
people all
enjoy it.
around. So thank you for coming on once again. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to shout out, Steve?
No, I think that the thing that people need to know, all that they need to know, is that all eyes are obviously on Gaza, and they're right to be on Gaza because of what's happening there. But also, people need to be aware that there is a genocide also taking place in Lebanon too.
Yeah,
And people often don't realize it because it doesn't get the same kind of coverage. So yeah, I think that's it. And I think despite the attacks, despite the genocidal operations of the Israelis, resistance continues, and the resistance is stronger than people realize, and will be victorious.
yeah, very well said, my friend. Thank you for your time, Steve Sweeney, ladies and gentlemen. Zoya's
Thank
love, Zoya's life. Are you there, my friend? Let's read some chats. Steve Sweeney is the man. Let's get right into it. I'm tired, Zoya, if you can't tell. But we got a lot of banger shows coming up. Um, I like wrapping up the week with these geopolitics power hour shows. I'm gonna get more into the military bagging Trump because what's the guy fucking name? Dan Kane, General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint of Staff. He came out and essentially there are stories about how he said he Trump needs to wrap up this war immediately. Like there's military generals that straight up saying that we need to wrap up this war. So we'll cover that on Sunday. Kind of tired now. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the show. Zoe, how you doing, my friend?
I'm awesome. So glad that we had Steve join us today. Um, it's a huge privilege, and we're so grateful that he stays up till 3, 4 in the morning just to join us and share his perspective.
Yeah,
Um,
Steve is one of those guests I just let cook. I'm like, bro, I'm gonna just let him cook. What a well-educated, well-informed guest.
yeah, and then a communist on top of it. I mean, dreams do come true.
Yeah, imagine being that based. Imagine being that based.
And I'm also really excited about the show coming up on Monday. Everybody make sure that you guys mark your calendars, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday. Shama's going to be here. It's going to be a very interesting discussion about what she's planning next, and she's going to weigh in on some of these DSA progressive wins and what it means for the movement.
Banger after banger. We always in the lab cooking, my friends.
Now, let's get into your chats. Rami, Ukraine proxy exists to weaken Russia. Absolutely. It's an old imperialist trick. Political homemaker. Hi, everyone. Glad to join while I make meatballs for dinner. Yes, I love that the chat is so close with us and you guys share everything that's going on in your lives. Violin Brian Berlitic does solid work and gives good citations. He hasn't missed yet. The stuff of his that I've been reading and watching, he has really good analysis. So, highly recommend his work. Maybe one day we'll even get him on the show. JB Joints, brother, thank you for the $5. What up, Nick and Zoya? Glad to finally be a channel member. Yay! Welcome to being a channel member. By the way, the Nick and Steve show looks like another banger. Always a banger when Steve joins. Crazy Cat, legend Steve Sweeney. Violin, yeah, they need wars to deplete inventories so they can order more. Just business, nothing personal. Absolutely. I mean, can you guys imagine if there was peace and they couldn't sell any of their military industrial complex toys? I mean, peace is really bad for business. That's why they're vilifying us. Um,
Exactly, Zoya.
yep. Afki Minkwim be. Just put the missiles in the fridge. You know what, guys? I bet you they do have some kind of refrigerators for missiles. I mean, it's not their money, it's our money, so they don't mind spending it excessively.
That's where they pulling out the dead soldiers from. They got a ton of dead soldiers and freezers that they're pulling out. Just wait, in the next few months, they're gonna be like, um, Colonel John Jackson died because of sudden illness. Just pulling people out of the freezer because they will never admit how many got smoked by Iran. The Goy
Yeah,
soldiers, more Goy soldiers are going to be sacrificed for the military-industrial complex. It's the price. It's the price Donald Trump is willing to make. Sacrifice he's willing to make.
it's all good. How many poor Ukrainians do you figure NATO fed into the meat grinder? A million? Probably more, honestly. And we won't have the real numbers for years. It's a real tragedy, very heartbreaking when you watch these grandfathers, fathers, and young men being dragged away with their wives and moms hanging on them,
It's
screaming and
crazy.
begging. Yeah, and that's what today's quote unquote Western leftists support.
Yeah, that's what Abdul Al Sayed. He wants more dead Ukrainians. Abdul Al Sayed. He wants to fight to the last Ukrainian to defend democracy.
Sad times. It's all good. Nazi generals don't go to the front, street sweepers do. Yeah, don't fall for it, working class. Don't normalize going somewhere else to kill other people's children. There are always other ways to survive in the system. Garlic lasagna. Nick, we love you and Zoya in Mexico City. Long live RBN. Thank you for watching. Always love comments from across the world. Mr. Natural, every war is a winner for the USC's military industrial complex. Yep. Brian, I am down to only a few people I can watch listen. Nick, Chris Hedges, Sabby, The Dissonance, and Illinois Green Party. I am sure I missed ones by ignorance or forgetfulness. Yeah, there are a lot of great channels. It's just that the channels with the largest platforms that get millions of views are always the ones that are aligning with mainstream. The more your talking points align with mainstream talking points, the more the algorithm boosts you, which should explain why we get so few views. Anthony Quimgigda. I'm just gonna call you Anthony. Jamal Thomas and Garland Nixon are great to watch as well. Absolutely. And Nick has a show coming up on Sunday with Jamal at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Kukul Con Man. Nick is raw and real. That's why we love him. Sal Good. Peaceful resistance is a religion now. MLK quotes and all. Yeah, absolutely. They try to erase all revolutionary history of how change actually happened.
And let me tell you, I'm tired of people like Rokon and these goddamn progressives who keep invoking MLK to justify why they support Nazis in Ukraine. That's what Rokon, you guys know he says that all the time. I support the spirit of resistance and I come from a tradition rooted in MLK, and that's why I support Nazis in Ukraine. That's, that's the line you hear from all the professional managerial class scum. What they do to MLK is tragic. Remember, MLK was murdered by the state, fam. You know, puts
Yeah,
it in.
they support ineffective resistance. That's their role. JB joins. I'd like to know what the absolute fuck is the reason their so called leftists all seem to have an issue with freedom fighters. They're not leftists.
Yes. Uh, the social democracy is the moderate wing of fascism. One of the illest quotes of all time, and a quote that has been vindicated throughout history all consistently. They will sell out the resistance because that's their job. That's their role as a cog in the machine to be the polite face of fascism and imperialism. That's why I'm not excited about the rise of social chauvinist fascists in the DSA who are being elected in the United States. Surprise, surprise, a bunch of chauvinists is elected in a genocidal party. Is anyone surprised about that?
The truth is, revolution scares them. They're comfortable and the system is working for them. They want to see a few things change, but they're willing to ignore the suffering of others because of their comfort, especially the suffering of others abroad. As long as they don't have to see it, they rhetorically will support any resistance, anything that aesthetically looks pleasing. That's how you get Ukraine flags and Palestine flags in the same bio, but they have zero geopolitical analysis and they're not interested in liberation. The system is working for them. That's the difference.
Yeah, on point as always, my friend.
Bryce Smith. What's up, Nick? Zoya's life, Zoya's love, and comrades. I think that's the first time I've said that myself.
Zoe is indeed love, and she is it is indeed life.
You guys
Good
make
shout out to
me
my
giddy.
friend there.
So good. Climate activists probably never thought they'd be labeled terrorists before the War on Terror and Patriot Act. I mean, anyone, even during the Vietnam War, that took direct action against the system definitely knows what the system is capable of. But it has gone worse in our lifetimes. Even when they were charging activists at Standing Rock as domestic terrorists for opposing the poisoning of their land with a pipeline. So we've been just slowly marching towards a worse fascistic society every single administration. Violin, you are correct in observing that the mainstreaming of genocidal politics is based around normalizing and social engineering. Yes, I did want to make the point that it is very suspicious how mainstream the Palestine movement became, only in comparison with the so many genocides happening around the world that I've been screaming about for decades, my entire career. And also any imagery we ever posted would immediately get censored. But they really allowed this information to spread. And it is suspicious what they allow us to see and don't allow us to see. And it just seems like at this point they want us to know the violence and brutality and normalize it and make us feel helpless while we watch all of these innocent civilians and especially children just die and suffer in the most brutal ways. I don't know what the agenda is, but it's something, and I've seen more dead children than I have in decades in just the last few years. And it is definitely affecting us. Brian, as a kid, I was an old time leftist and watched Gore Vidal. I attended all major protests, which cost me a lot of money. That's crazy that protesting costs a lot of money. Like that sentence shouldn't exist. Brian, to think Beirut was once the Paris of the Middle East when I was a kid, now it is tattered. Yeah, the Western regime is bombing uh, humanity's history. All of these places in Syria, Iraq, Iran, we're talking about ancient sites of Babylon, Mesopotamia, and that history is part of human history, and they're erasing it. Kat Terrell, all Western news has been propaganda our entire lives. Absolutely. Under and six low. Respect to a real journalist in the front lines. Bless up. Absolutely. We need brave journalists and truth tellers. Fellow Taoists, the true delusion they're banking on is if they pacify external enemies, they can preserve their power.
Yeah, I just want to say Steve Sweeney is definitely skyrocketed. One of my favorite guests, really quickly. 2 shows in, always a great show. He's on the front lines. He's been attacked by Israel. Yeah, big shout out to him. You guys got to follow his work.
Yeah, we're super lucky. Robert A. Penn, Why does it always disallow my super chat? Is it me or Nick? It's never Nick. Nick's never disallowed a super chat in all the years that we've had the podcast. So if you guys are ever wondering, is it YouTube or one of us? It's YouTube. And then he was able to send a super chat. Yay, thank you. Some sort of New Zealand dollars, $50. Thank you for the super sticker. Always blame YouTube, guys. JB Joins brother. Sweeney is a living legend. Yeah, he's getting his flowers in the chat, which are well deserved. Stephanie Caro. Thank you, Steve. Ashura, communist? I thought Shama was a true socialist. I think she goes identifies as socialist and Marxist, but this is where, I'm tired of all these labels after decades. I want to know where you stand. Do you want clean drinking water? Do you think we all deserve affordable health care and housing? I mean, the real social issues and economic issues impacting all of us, majority of our society agrees on. And at some point, the labels become divisive, confusing, and damaging. So for me, it's much more important for us to unite on issues impacting the entire working class. And from there, we will build community and we will figure out what's best for us. And that's really what Marxism is. But the term has been so misinterpreted and misrepresented that it just becomes an obstacle in organizing sometimes.
Yeah,
So we should
very,
unite around issues.
very well said. Though. I couldn't say it better myself. I might got here myself, but the label doesn't really matter. We know Sean was friends with communists. I'm a pretty radical communist myself. She's friends with communists. She's ran unapologetically as a socialist. She didn't run from it like El Sayed, and she got over. She's still getting votes. Like I think it's a credible sign. I think Shama would be crazy if she didn't run again. Like most people don't win the first run, but to Shama, bro, you gotta realize, and we're gonna dive more into this on Monday. Shama had all the labor unions betray her. Fam, every single labor union endorsed Adam Smith. The entire establishment endorsed Adam Smith. The entirety of the professional managerial class left was rooting against Shama and refused to platform her. And she still got over 22,000 votes and is still counting. Over 20%. There's a lot of potential there. I hate people who just dive into nihilism, which I understand is easy, but there's a lot of potential there. That's what she did with the deck stacked against her. But I don't want to spoil it. We talk about this more on Monday.
Yeah, and there have been other Justice Democrat candidates and DSA candidates that lost their first run and then won the second time. So it's not unusual to have a first time run just to build that name recognition and then the second time out organize the incumbent. People have to have patience. We're building. We can't just, expect victories to come easy. We got to work for it.
Exactly.
Brian, Nick gets good guests because he punches above his weight limit. Um, a lot of people get boosted by the algorithm that are nowhere near as good as Nick on geopolitics, on just general knowledge and facts. So Nick's heavily suppressed, and we're definitely blessed by all the guests that show up for our community and solidarity. And they gain nothing by doing this, really. They just give their time to us, and we're super appreciative. But I think Nick is above a lot of people's weight limit, and they're just scared of him because they can debate him. Machine, thank you for the $5. I've seen Trotskyites attack mutual aid because theorizing and waiting for the revolution is better. Interested in Nick's reaction to that. Nick?
Um, you had to give me examples, but yeah, I've seen that too. Um, yeah, there's a lot. I don't have really much to add to this, but yeah, yeah, There's some Trotskyists like Shama. She's an advocate of mutual aid. I wouldn't say everyone, but yeah, I have strong disagreements with a lot of Trotskyites. Just like I got a lot of strong disagreements with anarchists and stuff, but I won't ever allow, like, I will always organize with people who do good. I feel like there's way too, and the only reason I'm being careful because I feel like there's way too much sectarianism in the left where we can't afford it. In the middle of a genocide, everyone treats organizing like high school. So yeah, I can spend a lot of time talking about how much I like the geopolitical analysis differences between me and Trotskyites, but many of them want to end Zionism. Many of them want to liberate the working class from the doing their class, and at this point, I want to work with the ones in good faith. I think there may be accounts that saying this, but I don't think they're good faith. Like I think there's way more infiltration in the left and people who call themselves socialists than people believe. Like the DSA, just for example, is massively infiltrated, and they have a policy where they don't like kicking people out because they consider that authoritarian. That's why they don't eject AOC. That was their reasoning. So if you're not like a Democrat, Republican, if you're a trot like repeating empire narratives and voting for Democrats, there's gonna be a big problem because there are some trots that do that. But people who rep Trotsky, who's opposed to Zionism, who actually do support mutual aid, I'll try to work with anyone at this point. I don't know if that response you wanted, but thank you for super chat.
Yeah, and the establishment definitely wants to divide us. So, our biggest task at hand right now is to build solidarity. If everyone's intentions are at the same place, the labels become less important. Kat Terrell, thank you for the $10. I got to think about all this s'mores money. Appreciate the comment. Comrade Cranky, thank you for the $2. Mir, Zoya, if you're referring to the Russian word, mir means peace in Russian. And that's very sweet of you if I'm understanding the chat correctly. Fellow Taoist, I followed this channel for a bit, but vids and streams always get buried in my feed. That's why, and this is our last comment for today. We have a 3 hour stream to watch that we did on Wednesday. That's why it's so important that you guys like, share, subscribe. This channel is always going to be heavily suppressed. It's completely built by you, for you, supported by you. So the only way people will hear about these things is if you guys are spreading the information yourselves. Also, please support our work on Patreon. It's scrolling across the link, across the screen, and there's a link in the description as well. Follow us on all platforms, Kick, Twitch, and of course, Nick's biggest platform on Twitter. And tune in on Sunday. Nick, are you doing a show this Sunday with Jamal?
Yeah, we was gonna do a show last Sunday, but Jamal was feeling a little bit under the weather. So I think we're good this Sunday, but we will see. I'll let you guys know for sure on Sunday, but I'm pretty sure we are. Monday we have Shama. Who we have Wednesday, Zoya? Do you remember?
Let me open our calendar. We have a lot of guests.
Yeah, let's do a quick shout out on that, and I'll let you wrap the stream up with that, Zoya. Appreciate you.
Awesome. So today we had Steve. Monday we have Shama. On the 12th Wednesday, we have David Miller, and he just won a really important landmark case regarding anti Zionism being not anti Semitic. So that's going to be a really good don't miss interview. On the 14th, we have Dr. CBS. Uh, She's a wonderful academic, and she wrote a great book, Marxist and Black Revolutionary. So we are always privileged to be in her good graces and company. On the 17th, we have Ollie Vargas. He specializes in the global south, especially what's going on in Venezuela, Cuba, and Latin America. And on Friday, we have Showtime joining us. He's a guy whose profile says he's exiled from Detroit and he's been living in China for over 2 decades. He has a lot of great perspectives he can share with us. And that's it for now. We're also working on some other heavy hitter guests, but they haven't confirmed. We will keep you guys posted on that. Of course, as always, please remember that everything you do matters. They want to make us feel powerless, but we are the most powerful, especially united together. We are an unstoppable force. And what each of us can do starting right now is organize in our communities, build mutual aids, help each other out, help your neighbors. And from there, we will build our organizations, we will fight generationally, and of course, we will win. Never give up the fight. Stay optimistic. Have a great Friday night, and we will see you Sunday on Jamal's show and Monday right back here. Love and solidarity.